Majora's Mask is one of the Zelda series' most unique titles. It's a massively ambitious and brave thematic departure from other Zelda games on a level rivaled only by Twilight Princess. It's easily my pick for the best game in the series, and I do not say that lightly. Immediately after the events of Ocarina of Time, Link leaves Hyrule in search of a long-lost and beloved friend, and while it's never explicitly stated, it's generally accepted that this friend is Navi. He gets robbed by Skull Kid wearing Majora's Mask, who steals both the Ocarina of Time and Epona. He then curses Link to be trapped in the form of a Deku scrub. Link pursues Skull Kid and ends up in Termina, canonically a parallel universe to Hyrule. It's here that he meets the Happy Mask Salesman in all of his mysterious and enigmatic glory. He offers to heal Link if he can get back both the Ocarina and the mask, but he only gives Link 3 days to do so. Meanwhile, the moon is rapidly descending upon Termina, bringing with it certain destruction. On the final day, Link confronts Skull Kid, who it turns out is bringing the moon down with the power of the mask. Link manages to retrieve the Ocarina and uses it to go back 3 days in time. He returns to the Masked Man, who teaches him the Song of Healing, which returns him to his human form. But the Masked Man learns that you failed to get the mask and angrily reveals that it's possessed by the spirit of a demon with relentless destructive power. No shit. Link is forced to go to 4 temples to awaken 4 spirits to protect the land and retrieve the mask. Immediately, the game delivers this immense sense of urgency, and I love that. Even when you're not actually doing the main story, the game is constantly reminding you of the fact that you are hours from obliteration. On a technical level, Majora's Mask is superb. The graphics are certainly better than those of Ocarina of Time. The textures are much better, there is constant use of actual 3D models to show off the landmarks of the game's areas in the distance, instead of just 2D backgrounds, and best of all, you will never find any of those shitty pre-rendered 2D rooms in this game. The game overall is just visually very impressive. The soundtrack is also excellent. It recycles a handful of songs from Ocarina of Time, but everything else is completely original and it's great. It's so thematically perfect, and in addition to this, the game also includes much more voice work. It's still mostly brief guttural sounds, but they included so many more for each of the characters, which really makes them feel even more fleshed out. The soundtrack in general is, while not by a huge margin, better than Ocarina of Time's. And while I could include several examples of this, I think it's best to just say that this game actually has the Zelda theme. Isn't that funny? The Zelda game in which Zelda is largely irrelevant, and yet it has the Zelda theme and somehow Ocarina doesn't. In terms of gameplay, Majora's Mask is leaps and bounds ahead of Ocarina of Time. Much of this is because you can change between 4 different characters. You have Link, naturally, who it seems has become a fucking acrobat after Ocarina of Time. Is that what he was doing with Zelda the whole time, just practicing his fucking parkour? Then you got the Zora. He can swim real fast and breathe underwater. If you cross him, you'll get fucking slaughtered. Then you got the Goron. This is so strong, it isn't funny. If you mess with him, he'll take your fucking money. Then you can also become a Deku scrub. He can fly real high with his flower helicopter. But Kremlings beware, cause he's actually kinda shit. He can blow bubbles though. Beyond the different characters, Link himself just has a lot of cool stuff at his disposal. Most of the really cool items from Ocarina of Time make a comeback, like the hookshot and all the different elemental types of arrows. In addition to this, you also get a bunch of masks that do some really cool stuff. You get the bomb mask that lets you blow yourself up at random. There's the postman hat, which lets you steal people's mail. There's this mask which lets you lead a marching band of animals. There's a mask that lets you do this. Also, look at these 4 masks here all in a row. Intentional or not, this is the Star Fox team. And look, they even added Pigma. Because sure, why not? He was the best one. Majora's Mask really is one of those kinds of games that is comfortable with you just having fun with its features. The temples in Majora's Mask are excellent. Honestly, I love all of them. And just so you guys fully understand the gravity of that statement, this game has a water temple. There's a water temple in here, and I actually enjoy it. This is living proof that water temples can be fun. I'd prefer not to spoil too much of the temples because there are only 4, but they're all amazing. And another cool thing is that each of them have 15 stray fairies. If you collect them all, you can bring them to the region's respective Great Fairy and get an upgrade. I also just like Termina Field much more than Hyrule Field. Sure, it's smaller, but it seems like there's a lot more stuff going on. I think one of the greatest things about Majora's Mask is how dense it is. Someone who's played Ocarina might look at this and say, this is a small ass game, there's only 4 dungeons, what the hell? Which yes, there are in fact only 4 dungeons. But aside from that, even though the world might look smaller than Ocarina's Hyrule, this game has so much less unused space. The game is just densely packed with content. Off the top of my head, I'd say there's roughly the same amount of content as in Ocarina of Time. And on top of that, the world itself just feels so much more real. The time mechanic is genius, because over the course of 3 days, all the characters have these meticulous schedules that they always follow to a T. The characters usually have things going on, and depending on your choices, the specifics of those goings on can change, which I'll talk about in a minute. In Ocarina of Time, you can travel back and forth 7 years, but the characters' roles in either of these moments in time are static. In Majora's Mask, you can see everything that happens. This guy thinks he's going to perform at a carnival, but you see him get the bad news that it's cancelled. Later, you find him at the bar drinking away his sadness, and then the next day he's hungover in his room. I fucking love that. And the time aspect of this game is just phenomenal. Some believe that the 4th dimension is time. If that's true, could Majora's Mask be the first 4D video game? That'd be fucking crazy. In 1996, Nintendo releases the first fully 3D video game. Then, 4 years later, goes on to make the first 4D video game? You can't fucking stop these guys. Then of course there's the side quests. Near the beginning of the game, you get what's called the Bomber's Notebook. As you talk to certain people, they get added to the notebook, along with specific blocks of time that correspond with the active parts of their schedule. If you consult with these characters during their respective blocks of time, you can initiate a side quest. Some further side quests are enabled from certain prerequisite side quests. Some side quests are little things that aren't that extensive. Some of them can be very extensive. In fact, there's one in particular that I absolutely want to tell you about, the Cafe and Anju side mission. I'm conflicted. I really want to talk about this because it's an amazing example of how powerful this game can be, but at the same time, I don't want to spoil it for anyone. So here's what I'm going to do. Since I'm about to talk about the entire mission, if you don't want this spoiled for you, skip to this time in the video. Madame Aroma, the mayor's wife, asks you to find her son, Cafe, who's gone into hiding. She gives you this mask which resembles him so you can inquire about his whereabouts. It happens that Anju, who runs the Stockpot Inn, is engaged to Cafe and is also concerned about his whereabouts. You talk to her at midnight on the first day and she gives you a letter. You put that letter in a post box and the mailman, regular as clockwork as usual, delivers it to him on the second day. It's at this moment that you can now go into the back room of the Curiosity Shop and meet him. It turns out that Cafe has been turned into a child by the Skull Kid. It also happens that in his attempt to seek the help of the Great Fairy, he was robbed by Sakon, a local thief who stole a mask he made for the wedding. He'd been waiting in the back room of the Curiosity Shop, to see if Sakon would sell it. Kafei gives Link a pendant to give to Anju as a memento and I guess reassurance that he's not dead. On the final day, you go back into the curiosity shop back room to find the owner standing around. The owner reveals that he knew Kafei since he was very young and allowed him to scope out the shop for the mask. He then reveals that Sakon did show up and Kafei chased him to his hideout all the way out in Ikana village. He subsequently gives you a letter to deliver that Kafei addressed to his mother. Now you join Kafei in waiting for Sakon to open his hideout and chase after him to get the mask back. But it turns out this guy has a next level security system set up, so you have to solve puzzles and kill enemies to get to the end of the conveyor belt before the mask drops out of existence. If you make it, Kafei will take the mask and rush back to Clocktown. At this point, the town is minutes from destruction. Now let's talk about that letter for a minute. At this point, you can either give it directly to Kafei's mother at the bar and get a bottle with premium Chateau Romani, or you can give it to the postman who's conflicted about whether to stay on schedule or abandon the schedule to escape the impending apocalypse. If you give it to him, he delivers it to Madame Aroma and she orders him to save himself. You can then find the postman outside the bar where he thanks you by giving you the postman's hat. That's just amazing, but it gets even better. You go back to Anju at the inn, who's waiting for Kafei as she knows he will fulfill his promise to her. And sure enough, he does. Keep in mind, this has absolutely zero bearing on the game's main story at all, and yet it's said more in the tens of minutes that it takes to complete the mission than some games say in their entire playtime. And there's something just so beautiful about them not caring that certain destruction is upon them, and being prepared to stay and greet the morning. It also goes to show just how interconnected this world is. Kafei is almost like the center of the universe here. He's the son of the mayor and his wife. He's engaged to Anju, he's known the curiosity shop guy since youth, he wants Sakon dead like any reasonable person would, and of course he knows the mailman. The side quests are honestly the greatest thing about this game. It adds a whole new depth to not only the characters but the world they inhabit. It does kinda suck that the quests get undone when you eventually have to go back in time, but not only do you keep the rewards from that quest, but also it means you can redo the side quests as many times as you wish. I could do the aforementioned Anju Kafei side quest a billion times. I think another one of this game's greatest traits is that so many of the characters are just earthly, average people who are all just caught in the middle of this hysterical turbulence of a world facing certain annihilation. You could play through the entire game without ever doing any of the side quests, but to do that would be a huge disservice not only to yourself, but also the game. It's really fascinating to see how these people change day to day, depending on whether or not you decide to play an active role in their routine. It also helps to put everything into perspective as everyone starts coming to grips with the fact that they and their entire world are about to be irreparably decimated. The side quests give off this impression of Link being a serial problem solver, which makes him seem like the center of the universe. But at the same time, Majora's Mask has this incredible ability to make the player feel completely inconsequential. When you're outside in Majora's Mask, you can see the evil moon in the sky from anywhere, a constant visual reminder of the very real existential threat that looms over you constantly. Even when you can't see it, so many buildings have a clock that is constantly inching closer to the day of reckoning. There's even a clock at the bottom of the screen. Time doesn't start and stop at your leisure. You can also see the terrified citizens' reaction to the impending doom. The soldiers at the gate are literally shaking in their shoes as they keep their oath to guard the town. When you're on the last day, there are constant earthquakes. Even while you're fighting a deadly temple boss, you're always reminded of the much huger threat that is just hours away from deleting your entire existence. And even when you do make a difference, eventually you have to turn the clock backwards. You still reap the benefits of whatever side quest you completed, but the other characters in that quest act like they never met you before, and their issues go unresolved. It's almost like Sisyphus, except some absent-minded person gives him $1 every time the boulder falls down. This culminates into a chillingly existential experience. It's worth noting that there's a theory that the game is about the 5 stages of grief, with each world including Clocktown representing the stages in order. As cool as it is, I always thought it was a stretch. So let me offer an even worse theory. The game is about puberty. Now right away you're gonna want to laugh, but I have some ground to stand on. First of all, Link is noticeably older than Kid Link was in Ocarina, to the point that the Hylian shield is no longer too big for him. You can notice his facial features have also changed. At the same time, the game can be very emotionally turbulent, not unlike someone going through puberty. The inescapable sense of doom also plays into this. While puberty is tough on average people, it can only be assumed that it's a goddamn hell nightmare for Link, as he's already been an adult once in Ocarina. Of course, even though he's lost his childhood innocence, he was basically comatose for the time he would have gone through puberty, so the process is further aggravated by all the messed up shit that he's seen in Ocarina of Time. On top of this, the masks could be a metaphor for Link searching to find his own identity, just like teenagers go through phases of their own. Additionally, it should be noted that the game can be oddly sexual at times. There's this fisherman who wants a nice picture of a Gerudo pirate to jack off to, and there's this part where Cremia buries Link's face in her chest. Okay, this is a stretch too, but this is what makes the game so great. Since it's not as simple and clear-cut as Ocarina, it invites speculation. Between the immensely bold and amazingly effective risks this game takes in both its storytelling and gameplay mechanics, this game is simultaneously a game and an art game. I can say without a doubt that this is my favorite Zelda game and is in general a perfect video game. No, fuck that. I'd hate to shit on anyone's parade, least of all my own, but this game is not quite perfect. The biggest problem with the game is the camera, and I don't mean the camera like in Banjo-Kazooie, I mean literally this fucking camera. Remember how I mentioned that mission where you had to take a picture of a pirate for this guy to jack off to? Well, he won't just take any old picture, he needs a good picture, but he won't define exactly what that means. Like, come on, man, are you expecting them to fucking strip and pose for the camera? This is not DeviantArt, motherfucker. There's another mission with the camera where you have to take a good picture of the scenery in the swamp. But I don't know, isn't that kind of subjective? I make YouTube videos, I'm not a professional photographer. Also, the game only has 2 files instead of 3, which is kinda dumb. I guess it takes a lot more space to save a 4-dimensional game. I could search high and low for more nitpicks, but it would be an exercise in futility. This is an absolutely wonderful game. It's indicative of a level of ingenuity, creativity, and artistic vision that I doubt Nintendo will ever be able to match again. It's ahead of its time and stands on its own amongst the other Zelda games. There are only a handful of games that leave a lasting impression on me on the scale that this game does. Zelda will most probably continue to be a strong franchise, but there very well may never be another game as special as this one.